I'm 31, male, and I just moved out of the apartment I shared with my girlfriend of 4 years. Her name is Ashley, she's 29, and until last week, I thought we were building something real together. Turns out I was just the convenient guy who paid most of the bills, while her college friends treated me like their personal entertainment and social experiment. Let me start from the beginning, because this story has been building for years, and the final confrontation was just the culmination of a slow-burning disaster. Ashley and I met at a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, back in October 2020, right in the middle of all the COVID craziness. She was working on her laptop, some kind of graphic design project for a local brewery that was trying to pivot to online sales. And I was reading between shifts. I'm a carpenter, mostly custom furniture and home renovations. I specialize in restoration work, taking old pieces that have been forgotten in attics or damaged by time and bringing them back to life. Or creating new furniture that looks like it belongs in a century-old craftsman home. I remember exactly what she was wearing that day. A cream-colored sweater that looked hand-knitted, dark jeans, and these vintage leather boots that had clearly been well-loved. Her hair was in this messy bun, held up with what looked like a pencil, and she had these wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. She looked like she'd stepped out of an indie film about quirky creative types finding love in unexpected places. We started talking about the book I was reading, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Not exactly light coffee shop reading, but my grandfather had given it to me years ago, and I'd been slowly working through it during breaks. Ashley seemed genuinely interested, not just politely curious. She asked thoughtful questions about Stoic philosophy, made connections I hadn't thought of, challenged some of the ideas in ways that made me think deeper. "I love that you're reading philosophy," she said, stirring her latte with this little smile. "Most guys I meet are either reading self-help business books or not reading at all." That should have been my first clue about how she viewed most men, but at the time, it felt like a compliment. Not many people want to discuss the nature of virtue and the acceptance of fate at 7 a.m. over coffee, but Ashley did. She was smart, creative, had this infectious laugh that made everyone in the coffee shop turn around when she really got going. She told me about her work, how she was trying to build a freelance design business focused on helping small, local businesses create authentic brand identities that reflected their actual values, rather than just trying to look trendy. That first conversation lasted 3 hours. I was supposed to be at a job site by 8 a.m. to start installing custom cabinets in a kitchen renovation, but I called my foreman Derek and told him I had a family emergency. First time I'd ever lied to get out of work, but something about Ashley made me want to keep talking. She had this way of looking at things that was completely different from mine, but somehow complementary. Where I was practical and focused on what could be built or fixed, she was conceptual and focused on what things meant or represented. We exchanged numbers, and I asked her out for dinner that weekend. She suggested this little Ethiopian restaurant in Southeast Portland, somewhere I never would have thought to try. Over injera and spicy lentils, we talked about everything. Our families, our dreams, our failures, our fears about the pandemic, and what the world was going to look like when it ended. I learned that Ashley had grown up in Lake Oswego, a wealthy suburb south of Portland, the daughter of a corporate lawyer and a woman who managed high-end real estate. She'd gone to Lewis and Clark College, a private liberal arts school that cost more per year than I made in those days. But she'd rebelled against her family's expectations, turned down law school, and was trying to make it as an independent creative professional. She learned that I'd grown up in a working-class neighborhood in Southeast Portland, raised by my grandmother after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. My grandmother had worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and watching kids during the day, to keep us afloat. I'd gotten into carpentry through a vocational program in high school, started working construction at 18, and slowly built up the skills and reputation to do the kind of restoration work I loved. "I love that you work with your hands," she said, reaching across the table to touch my fingers, tracing the small scars and calluses that come with the territory. "There's something so honest about creating things that people actually use and live with." Again, I took it as a compliment, but looking back, I wonder if she was already romanticizing me, turning me into some kind of noble savage archetype instead of seeing me as a complete person. For the first 6 months, things were absolutely magical. We'd meet at coffee shops, take long walks around the city, cook dinner together at her studio apartment near the art museum. She'd show me design projects she was working on, ask for my opinion on color schemes and layouts. I'd tell her about furniture pieces I was restoring, the history I'd research about the original makers, the techniques I was learning from old books and YouTube videos. She seemed fascinated by my work in a way that no one had been before. She'd come with me to estate sales and antique shops, help me spot pieces that had good bones underneath layers of bad paint or neglect. She had an eye for design that complemented my technical knowledge perfectly. The pandemic actually brought us closer together faster than we might have otherwise. We were both essentially freelancers, working from home, navigating the uncertainty of that time. When her lease was up in March 2021, it made sense for her to move in with me. I'd been renting a small house in the Richmond neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it had a basement workshop where I could do my restoration work. For the first 2 years, things were incredible. We found a rhythm that worked for both of us. Mornings were quiet work time. She'd set up her laptop at the kitchen table with her coffee and dive into client projects, while I'd either head out to job sites or go down to the workshop. Evenings were for each other, cooking dinner together, watching movies, taking evening walks around the neighborhood. We split expenses fairly at first. Rent, groceries, utilities, date nights, everything was 50-50, or close to it. I was making decent money. She was building her client base slowly but steadily. She had this dream of eventually opening her own design studio, maybe even expanding into interior design for restaurants and retail spaces. As her business grew and she started landing bigger clients, something shifted. She began investing more heavily in her business, expensive design software subscriptions, a high-end computer, professional development courses, networking events. I understood completely. When you're building a business, especially a creative one, you have to invest in yourself and your tools. So when she suggested that I take over more of the household expenses temporarily while she reinvested her earnings into growing the business, I agreed without hesitation. Just until I get this new equipment paid off and build up my client base, she said. Maybe 6 months, a year at most. Of course, I said. We're a team. When you succeed, we both succeed. 6 months turned into a year turned into 2 years. By the time this all fell apart, I was paying about 80% of our shared expenses, while Ashley put almost everything she earned back into her business or savings. I didn't mind, honestly. I loved her, and I was proud of her ambition. My carpentry work was steadier than ever. Word had gotten around about my restoration skills, and I'd started taking on weekend projects that paid extremely well. Wealthy families in the West Hills would hire me to restore antique furniture pieces or create custom built-ins that matched the original craftsmanship in their historic homes. I had a 6-month waiting list and was making more money than I'd ever made in my life. Plus, I genuinely believed in Ashley's vision. She was talented, dedicated, and I thought we were building something together. When she succeeded, our life together would be better. When she could afford to contribute more equally again, we'd start talking about marriage, maybe buying a house together, building the kind of partnership I'd always dreamed of. But then her college friends started visiting more frequently. There's Madison, 30, who works as a senior software engineer at Nike and never lets anyone forget she makes $150K a year. She's the type who name drops the expensive restaurants she goes to, always finds a way to mention her salary or stock options in casual conversation, and takes photos of her food at every meal to post on Instagram with captions about treating herself to $200 dinners. Caroline, 28, is getting her PhD in sociology at Portland State University and treats every social interaction like a research opportunity. She has this incredibly annoying habit of psychoanalyzing everything anyone says, using academic jargon to make simple observations sound profound. She'll say things like, "That's an interesting manifestation of late-stage capitalist alienation," when someone complains about their job, or "I'm seeing some real hegemonic masculine performance here," when a guy opens a door for someone. And Brittany, 29, who inherited a trust fund from her grandfather and hasn't worked a real job since college graduation. She calls herself a lifestyle influencer and wellness consultant, which, as far as I can tell, means she posts pictures of expensive brunches and boutique shopping trips on social media, while occasionally selling overpriced supplements to other wealthy women who want to pretend they're entrepreneurs. In the beginning, when Ashley and I first started dating, I rarely saw these friends. They'd keep in touch through group chats and occasional video calls, but they were all busy with their own lives. Madison was climbing the corporate ladder at Nike, Caroline was deep in graduate school, and Brittany was traveling around Europe, finding herself with daddy's money. But as the pandemic restrictions lifted and Ashley's business started taking off, they began showing up more often. First, it was just for special occasions. Ashley's birthday, New Year's Eve, celebrating when she landed a particularly big client. But gradually, it became a regular thing. They'd decide to have a girls' weekend in Portland, or Caroline would need a break from her thesis research, or Madison would want to get out of the corporate world for a few days. At first, their comments about me and my work were subtle, little digs disguised as innocent questions or concern for Ashley's future. "So, Michael, do you ever think about going back to school? Maybe getting into architecture or engineering?" Madison would ask, with that fake concerned tone people use when they're trying to sound helpful while actually being condescending. I mean, there's so much opportunity in tech right now, and with your hands-on experience, you could probably transition into something more scalable. The implication was always that what I was doing wasn't real enough, professional enough, ambitious enough. Caroline would make observations about class dynamics in modern relationships and how interesting it was that Ashley was dating someone from such a different socioeconomic background. She'd say it like I wasn't sitting right there, like I was some kind of anthropological specimen she was studying for her research. It's fascinating how couples navigate different cultural capitals, she'd say, sipping wine and looking between Ashley and me like we were subjects in an experiment. The tension between aesthetic appreciation and economic anxiety must create some really complex power dynamics. I had no idea what half of those words meant in the context she was using them, but I understood the tone perfectly. Brittany was more direct in her criticism, but she disguised it as concern for Ashley's future and potential. "Ashley, you're so talented," she'd say, usually after a few glasses of wine. "You could really go places in the design world. I just worry that you're not optimizing your opportunities. You know, like you're so focused on this little Portland scene, but there are amazing opportunities in New York or LA or even Seattle, places where your work would be valued at the level it deserves." The implication was always clear. I was what was holding Ashley back from reaching her potential. I was the anchor keeping her tied to this little Portland scene instead of soaring to the heights she deserved. Ashley would laugh along with their comments, and later she'd tell me they didn't mean anything by it. "They're just not used to dating outside academic and professional circles," she'd say when I'd express frustration. "You know how it is with college friends. They think everyone should follow the same path they did. They mean well." But I could see that their words were having an effect on her. She started making little comments about my work that she'd never made before, asking if I ever got tired of doing the same thing every day, or whether I wanted to challenge myself more professionally. She'd suggest I look into business classes, or maybe think about expanding beyond restoration work into something more entrepreneurial. "You're so good at what you do," she'd say. "But don't you want to build something bigger? Create a business that could scale beyond just your personal labor?" It was like she was starting to see my work through her friend's eyes instead of her own. The comments escalated slowly over the course of a year. What started as subtle suggestions about my education and career trajectory gradually became more pointed observations about our relationship dynamic and lifestyle differences. Last fall, Madison started making jokes about how I was Ashley's project, like she was fixing me or something. "It's so sweet how you're domesticating him, Ash," she'd say when I'd cook dinner or do household chores. "Training him to be good house husband material. Very progressive of you to reverse traditional gender roles like that." The joke being, of course, that Ashley was the breadwinner and I was some kind of kept man, despite the fact that I was paying most of our bills. Caroline would psychoanalyze everything I said, making comments about traditional masculine insecurity or working class resentment whenever I disagreed with anything or tried to defend myself. She'd use phrases like unconscious bias and hegemonic masculinity to dismiss any point I tried to make, as if my opinions were just manifestations of some kind of social conditioning that I was too uneducated to recognize. "It's really interesting how Michael always brings the conversation back to practical concerns," she'd say when I'd try to participate in discussions about Ashley's business or their shared interests. Very typical of blue-collar masculine communication patterns, all about problem-solving and concrete outcomes instead of exploring the deeper conceptual frameworks. Brittany was the worst, though. She constantly suggested Ashley could do better, bringing up guys from their social circle who were more suitable for someone of Ashley's caliber and ambition. "Remember David from your design theory class? He just got promoted to senior analyst at Goldman Sachs. Sarah posted pictures from his housewarming party in that gorgeous condo in Tribeca." Or, "Oh my God, did you see that Alex started his own marketing consultancy? He's already working with major brands. So much potential there." Always the emphasis on potential, ambition, scaling, growing, reaching higher levels. As if the life Ashley and I had built together was somehow small or limiting or beneath what she deserved. The turning point came last month. Ashley had been stressed about a particularly demanding client, a tech startup that was preparing for an IPO and needed a complete rebrand within an impossibly short timeline. It was exactly the kind of high-pressure, high-visibility project that could really establish her reputation in the industry. She'd been working 16-hour days for 2 weeks straight, surviving on coffee and takeout, barely sleeping. I could see how much the stress was affecting her, so I suggested we take a weekend off and do something relaxing together. Maybe drive out to the coast, stay in a bed and breakfast, get away from work and the city, and just reconnect. "That sounds amazing," she said, leaning against me on the couch after another marathon work session. I really need to decompress. We made plans for the following weekend. I researched places to stay, made reservations at a nice restaurant, even found a gallery in Cannon Beach that was showing work by local artists, thinking Ashley would enjoy seeing what other creatives in Oregon were doing. But on Thursday, 3 days before our planned trip, Ashley came home with a different idea. So, change of plans for the weekend, she said, not even looking at me as she unpacked her laptop. The girls want to come up for a celebration weekend. Madison just got promoted to senior architect at Nike, and Caroline defended her thesis proposal successfully, and Brittany just launched some new wellness program thing. They want to celebrate together. What about our coast trip? I asked. We can do that anytime, she said, still not meeting my eyes. This is important. I haven't seen them all together since Christmas. I was disappointed, but I understood. Friends are important, and it did sound like they had legitimate things to celebrate. Okay, I said. Should I make myself scarce for the weekend, give you guys space for your celebration? Actually, they want to do something here, like a dinner party or something. Celebrate at home instead of going out to expensive restaurants. I should have seen what was coming, but I was still thinking like a supportive partner instead of recognizing the setup. I could cook, I offered. Make it special, do something really nice for them. Ashley's face lit up in a way that I now realize should have made me suspicious. Really? You'd do that? Of course. If they're important to you, they're important to me. So I planned a dinner party. Not just any dinner party, but the kind of elaborate, multi-course meal that I'd learned to prepare during the pandemic when Ashley and I had gotten really into cooking together. I took Friday off work, went to the farmer's market early to get the best ingredients, spent the entire day preparing. I made fresh pasta from scratch, pappardelle with a slow-braised short rib ragu that I'd been perfecting for months, roasted vegetables from the farmer's market, with herbs from the little garden I'd started in our backyard, a arugula and pear salad with a champagne vinaigrette. For dessert, I made individual chocolate lava cakes, something I'd learned from a YouTube chef during lockdown. I set the dining room table with the good dishes we'd collected from estate sales, lit candles throughout the apartment, put together a playlist of jazz and acoustic music that would create a nice ambiance without overwhelming conversation. I even bought 3 bottles of wine. Not cheap stuff, but mid-range bottles that I'd researched and chosen specifically to pair with different courses. The whole production probably cost me $300 and took 8 hours of preparation. I wanted Ashley's friends to see that I could do more than just work with my hands. I wanted to show them that I understood sophistication, that I could create an experience that matched their standards. I was proud of what I'd put together. The apartment looked beautiful, the food smelled incredible, everything was timed perfectly. Ashley got home from work just as I was finishing the final touches, and her reaction seemed genuinely surprised and delightful. This is amazing, she said, looking around at the candlelit space, the perfectly set table, the kitchen full of delicious smells. You really went all out. I wanted it to be special, I said, for your friends and for you. She kissed me, and for a moment, I felt like we were back to being a team. Her friends arrived an hour late, which completely threw off my timing for the meal, but wasn't entirely unexpected. They'd obviously been pre-gaming somewhere else. Madison was talking loudly, Caroline was giggling more than usual, and Brittany kept taking photos of everything with her phone. Madison immediately started making comments about the apartment, but not in a way that felt like genuine compliments. This is so cute, Ashley, she said, looking around like she was touring a museum exhibit. Very authentic, like living in a craftsman house museum. So much character. Actually, I said, trying to keep things light and informative, it's a 1920s craftsman-style apartment. I've been slowly restoring the original details, the crown molding, the built-in cabinets, the hardwood floors. Most of it was covered up by previous tenants, but you can bring it back if you know what to look for. How wonderful that you have such a hands-on hobby, Caroline said, in that tone people use when they're talking to children about their finger paintings. So much more authentic than just hiring professionals to do everything for you. Hobby. As if the work I'd spent years learning, the skills I'd developed, the business I'd built, was just something I did for fun in my spare time. The evening went downhill from there, despite the fact that the food was genuinely excellent. They complimented the meal, but in a way that made it clear they were surprised I could cook at such a level. This is actually really good, Michael, Brittany said, like she was shocked that someone like me could follow a complex recipe. Where did you learn to cook like this? Did you go to culinary school or something? As if the only way I could have developed any sophisticated skills was through formal education. My grandmother taught me the basics, I said, and I've been experimenting and learning from books and videos for years. Ashley and I got really into cooking together during the pandemic. Oh, that's so sweet, Madison said, like a little domestic partnership. Very traditional. Then they started talking about Ashley's work and the opportunities that might be opening up for her. Madison mentioned that Nike was always looking for freelance design consultants, and that Ashley's portfolio was exactly the kind of fresh perspective they needed. Caroline brought up some professor at Portland State who was looking for a research assistant to help with a project about design and social justice. Brittany knew someone in Seattle who was starting a high-end wellness brand and needed a complete visual identity package. I tried to contribute to the conversation, to show that I understood and supported Ashley's professional goals. Ashley's been working towards something like this for years, I said. It's amazing to see it all coming together. She's got such a clear vision for what she wants to create. The three of them exchanged one of those looks, the kind where people communicate something without words, usually something they don't want to say out loud. "Oh, Michael?" Brittany said with that patronizing smile that was becoming familiar. This is really industry insider stuff. Very technical, very specific to the creative professional world. Don't worry about trying to keep up with all the details. Don't worry about trying to keep up, as if I was some kind of simple-minded person who couldn't understand the complexities of the creative professional world. The whole evening, I felt like I was being studied, like I was some kind of exotic specimen they were observing for their entertainment. Caroline kept making these little sociological observations about traditional gender roles and domestic labor distribution, noting how interesting it was that I had done all the cooking and serving while Ashley sat with her friends like a guest at her own dinner party. Madison asked me pointed questions about my 5-year plan and whether I ever thought about scaling my skill set to create more sustainable income streams. As if what I was doing was some kind of temporary phase that I'd eventually grow out of when I got serious about my future. But the moment that really got to me was when they started talking about Ashley's potential to expand beyond Portland. "You could really blow up your business in a bigger market," Madison said, gesturing with her wine glass. "Portland's so limiting for someone with your talent. Seattle, San Francisco, even New York. There are so many opportunities for designers who understand how to work with tech companies and startups." "I love Portland," Ashley said, but I could hear something uncertain in her voice. "It's home. But is it really serving your career goals?" Caroline asked, leaning forward like a therapist probing a sensitive topic. "I mean, yes, it's comfortable and familiar, but comfort can be the enemy of growth. Plus," Brittany added, "you're young, you're talented, you don't have kids or major commitments tying you down. Now is the time to take risks, to really push yourself toward your potential." Don't have major commitments tying you down. I was sitting right there. We'd been together for 4 years, living together for 3, talking about marriage and buying a house together. But apparently, I didn't count as a major commitment. I was just some easily disposable obstacle to Ashley's self-actualization. "Well," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "if Ashley wanted to explore opportunities in other cities, we could look into it together. I'm sure there's good restoration work in any city with old buildings." The three of them laughed. Actually laughed, like I'd made some kind of joke. "Oh, honey," Madison said, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. "Those kinds of moves are really about career strategy and professional networking. It's not really a couples thing. Plus," Caroline added, "realistically, Michael's skill set is fairly location-dependent and market-specific. The kind of restoration work he does is pretty niche, probably not something you could count on as reliable income in a more competitive market. And let's be honest," Brittany said, not even pretending to soften the blow. Ashley would be entering a much more sophisticated professional environment. She'd need to be able to focus completely on building relationships and establishing herself, without having to worry about accommodating someone else's limitations. Accommodating someone else's limitations. I felt my face get hot, that familiar surge of anger and humiliation that I'd been swallowing for months every time these women opened their mouths around me. "What limitations?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Well," Caroline said, slipping into her academic tone, "socioeconomic mobility in creative industries is really complex. There are cultural capital requirements, networking demands, lifestyle expectations that can be challenging to navigate if you don't have the right background or preparation. In other words, I wasn't good enough for the world Ashley deserved to be part of." "Michael pays most of our expenses," Ashley said quietly, and for a moment, I thought she was going to defend me. "He's been incredibly supportive of my business." "Because he's territorial about it," Madison said immediately. "Ashley told us how you get weird about money, Michael, like you need to be the provider or something." I looked at Ashley. "I get weird about money?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "You do kind of take over all the bills. Like you don't trust me to handle finances responsibly. I pay them because you asked me to when your client payments were irregular," I said, feeling like I was defending myself against some kind of false accusation. "Remember? You said it was temporary, just until you got established." "That was 2 years ago," Brittany said. "Ashley's business is obviously successful now. The fact that you're still controlling the money feels kind of possessive." "Controlling the money." I was paying 80% of our shared expenses because Ashley was reinvesting everything she earned into her business. But somehow that made me controlling and possessive. Maybe it's time to reevaluate some of these arrangements, Caroline said, like she was offering professional therapeutic advice. Financial independence is really important for women, especially creative professionals who need flexibility to pursue opportunities. Which brings us back to the bigger question, Madison said, turning to Ashley like I wasn't even there anymore. Are you really optimizing your situation for the kind of growth you want to achieve? What do you mean? Ashley asked. I mean, Brittany said, leaning forward conspiratorially, you're 29. You're incredibly talented. You're at this amazing moment where you could really break into the big leagues, work with major brands, build something significant. But are you making choices that support that vision, or are you making choices that prioritize comfort and stability? The implication was crystal clear. I was comfort and stability. I was the safe, easy choice that was keeping Ashley from reaching her true potential. I just think, Madison continued, that someone with your vision and talent deserves to explore every possibility. And maybe that means being open to opportunities that might require some lifestyle adjustments. Like what? Ashley asked, and I could hear genuine curiosity in her voice. Like being willing to relocate for the right opportunity, Caroline said. Like being able to make decisions based purely on professional merit rather than having to accommodate someone else's limitations or preferences. Like thinking about what you really want your life to look like in 10 years, Brittany added, and working backward from there to figure out what steps you need to take now. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I'm going to clear some plates. I needed to get out of that room, away from their voices, away from the way Ashley was looking at them, like they were revealing some profound truth she'd never considered before. In the kitchen, I leaned against the sink and tried to process what was happening. These women were systematically dismantling my relationship, convincing Ashley that I was holding her back, and she was just sitting there absorbing it all, like it made perfect sense. I could hear them continuing the conversation without me, their voices lower but still audible. I just worry that you're settling, I heard Brittany say. Not because Michael isn't a good person, but because this relationship represents the path of least resistance rather than the path of most potential. What do you think I should do? Ashley asked. I think you should really consider whether this relationship is serving your highest self, Caroline said. Whether it's creating space for you to grow into the person you're meant to become, or whether it's keeping you comfortable in a version of yourself that's smaller than what you're capable of. I walked back into the dining room with a forced smile and started clearing plates. Nobody acknowledged my return to the room. The thing is, Madison was saying, you only get one life. And you're at this crucial moment where the decisions you make now will determine the trajectory of everything that comes after. Do you want to look back in 10 years and wonder what might have been possible if you'd been braver? I don't want to hurt Michael, Ashley said softly. He's been so supportive. But is staying with someone out of guilt really fair to either of you? Brittany asked. Isn't it more honest to acknowledge when you've outgrown a relationship and give both people the chance to find situations that actually fit who they're becoming? Outgrown. Like I was a pair of shoes Ashley had gotten too big for. I just think, Caroline said, that you deserve to be with someone who matches your ambition, who can be a true partner in building the kind of life you envision for yourself. Someone who enhances your potential rather than requiring you to diminish it. I finished clearing the table in silence, listening to them dissect my relationship like it was some kind of case study in settling for less than you deserve. When I came back from the kitchen, they were talking about specific opportunities Ashley should consider, people she should meet, cities she should visit. There's this amazing co-working space in Seattle specifically for creative professionals, Madison said. Amazing networking opportunities, collaboration possibilities. You should definitely visit next month when I'm up there for the Nike Summit. And I have contacts at several agencies in San Francisco, Brittany added. People who would absolutely want to meet you, especially if you're serious about scaling your business. The lifestyle there is so much more aligned with what you're building, Caroline said. Surrounded by other ambitious, creative people, way more inspiring than Portland's whole sleepy artisan thing. Portland's sleepy artisan thing. The city where I'd built my life, my business, my reputation. Where Ashley and I had met and fallen in love and created what I thought was a meaningful partnership. I sat back down at the table, but I felt like a stranger at my own dinner party. I actually got offered a project in San Francisco, Ashley said, and this was the first I was hearing about it. A tech startup that's doing some kind of AI-powered wellness platform. They want a complete brand identity package, and the budget is... She named a figure that was more than I made in 3 months. Ashley, that's amazing, Madison practically shouted. Why didn't you mention this earlier? When did this come up? I asked, Last week, Ashley said, still not looking at me directly. I was going to tell you, but it's probably nothing. They want me to come out for a consultation next month, but that doesn't mean I'd take the project. Why wouldn't you take it? Brittany asked, like the very idea was insane. Well, it would mean spending several weeks in San Francisco, maybe working on site with their team. And the project is big enough that I'd probably need to turn down local clients to focus on it completely. Ashley, Caroline said, leaning forward intensely, you cannot pass up an opportunity like this. This is exactly what we've been talking about. This is your moment. But what about my life here? Ashley asked. My apartment? My relationship? What about them? Madison asked. Michael would understand, right, Michael? You want Ashley to succeed. All three of them turned to look at me, and I realized this had been the plan all along. This entire evening had been designed to get to this moment where Ashley would reveal this opportunity and I'd be put in the position of either supporting her decision to leave or being the selfish boyfriend who held her back from her dreams. Of course, I want Ashley to succeed, I said carefully, but this is the first I'm hearing about this opportunity. I'd want to discuss it together, understand what it would mean for us. See? Brittany said to Ashley, like I'd just proven some point they'd been making. It's immediately about how it affects him, not about what's best for your career. That's not what I said, I protested. But it's what you meant, Caroline said. Classic possessive behavior. Making Ashley's professional opportunities about your needs and comfort instead of supporting her autonomy. I just think that when you're in a committed relationship, major life decisions should be made together, I said. Why? Madison asked. Why should Ashley's career be subject to your approval? Why should her potential be limited by what works for both of you instead of what works best for her? I looked at Ashley, waiting for her to say something, to defend our relationship, or at least acknowledge that what we'd built together had value. But she was staring at her wine glass, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Ashley? I said. What do you think? She finally looked up at me, and I could see something had changed in her expression. Like she was seeing me differently than she had a few hours earlier. I think, she said slowly, that maybe they have a point. Maybe I have been playing it safe. Maybe I've been so focused on what we've built together that I haven't really considered what might be possible if I was willing to take bigger risks. What does that mean? I asked. It means, Brittany said, jumping in before Ashley could respond, that Ashley deserves to explore her full potential without having to worry about how it affects someone else's plans. It means, Caroline added, that maybe this relationship has served its purpose, but you've both grown into different people who want different things. It means, Madison concluded, that Ashley should take the San Francisco project and see what else might be possible when she's not accommodating someone else's limitations. The room went quiet. I could hear the jazz music still playing softly in the background, the candles flickering, the sounds of the city outside our windows, all the elements of the beautiful evening I'd tried to create for these women who had just spent 3 hours systematically destroying my relationship. Ashley, I said, is this what you want? She looked at her friends, then back at me, and I could see the decision forming in her eyes. I think, she said, that maybe I need to start making decisions based on what's best for my future instead of what's most comfortable. And you think I'm not part of your future? I think, she said, looking directly at me for the first time all evening, that we want different things. And maybe if you can't handle my friends and their opinions, maybe you should find your own place. The words hit me like a physical blow. Find your own place. After 4 years together, after 3 years of me paying most of our expenses, after building what I thought was a life together, she was telling me to find my own place. Brittany started smiling. Madison actually clapped her hands together like she was watching a particularly satisfying movie ending. Well, I said, standing up slowly. Okay then. I walked to our bedroom, my former bedroom, and pulled out the duffel bag I used for overnight work trips. Started packing clothes, toiletries, anything I could fit. I could hear them talking in the living room, their voices getting more animated, more excited. They thought I was having some kind of dramatic breakdown, that I'd come back in a few minutes and apologize for being so sensitive. I packed everything I could fit in the bag, grabbed my laptop, my tool belt from the closet, and my guitar from the corner where it had been gathering dust for months. Walked back through the living room toward the door. Michael, Ashley called as I reached for my keys. Don't be dramatic. We can talk about this tomorrow when everyone's had time to process. No, I said, turning back to look at her one last time. We can't. You made your choice. I'm not choosing them over you, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm choosing what's best for my future. Same thing, I said. I walked out of the apartment and didn't look back. I drove to my buddy Ryan's place. He's a plumber who lives alone in a house he bought and renovated himself in Southeast Portland. When I showed up at his door at 11 p.m. with a duffel bag and probably a shell-shocked expression, he just opened the door wider. Beer's in the fridge, he said. Couch is yours as long as you need it. Ryan's been my friend since high school. He understands the value of skilled work, the satisfaction of building something with your hands, the dignity of earning an honest living doing something you're good at. He doesn't psychoanalyze everything or question whether I'm living up to my potential. He just makes space for a friend who needs somewhere to crash. That night, lying on Ryan's couch and staring at the ceiling, I replayed the entire evening in my mind. The careful way Ashley's friends had orchestrated the conversation, building up to the moment when they could present me as the obstacle to Ashley's success. The way Ashley had absorbed their arguments, like she'd never considered that our relationship might be worth fighting for. The way they'd made finding your own place sound like a favor they were doing for me. I thought about the 4 years Ashley and I had spent together. The quiet mornings working side by side, the excitement of her landing new clients, the pride I'd felt watching her business grow, the meals we'd cooked together, the antique stores we'd explored, the future we'd talked about building. Had I been naive to think that any of that mattered? Had I been fooling myself about what our relationship meant to her? My phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. "I hope you're safe. We should talk tomorrow." I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. Update 1. It's been a week since I left, and the fallout has been both predictable and revealing. The first few days, Ashley was texting constantly. It started with messages like, "You're being ridiculous," and "My friends were just trying to help you see the bigger picture." Then it shifted to more practical concerns. "We need to talk about the lease. And you can't just abandon your responsibilities here." My responsibilities. I'd been paying 80% of our shared expenses for 2 years, but somehow I was the one abandoning my responsibilities. By Thursday, she was calling from different numbers because I'd stopped responding to her texts. I finally answered one of the calls during my lunch break. "Michael, you need to come home," she said without any greeting. "We need to figure out the financial situation." "What financial situation?" I asked. "The rent, the utilities, the internet bill, groceries. You just left me with all of it." "Ashley, you literally told me to find my own place. That implies you'd be taking care of those things yourself. I thought you were just upset. I didn't think you'd actually leave permanently." "You told me to leave, in front of your friends, after they spent 3 hours explaining why I wasn't good enough for you." "They weren't saying you weren't good enough. They were being realistic about our compatibility and future goals." "Same thing." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, maybe crying. "Michael, I can't afford this place by myself." "What about the San Francisco project, the one that's going to launch your career into the big leagues?" That might not happen. It's not a sure thing." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before deciding I was the problem." She hung up. An hour later, I got a text from Madison. "Ashley's crying because of you. Real mature, walking out when she needed support most." I blocked Madison's number. Friday morning, I got a call from our landlord, Jim Patterson. He's a good guy, probably in his 60s, owns several properties around Portland. I've always been the one to call him about maintenance issues, and I've helped him with a few small renovation projects on his properties over the years. "Mike, Ashley called me yesterday," he said. "Says you moved out and she wants your name off the lease. That true?" "It's complicated, Jim. We broke up. I moved out temporarily, but legally I'm still responsible for the lease until we figure out how to handle it." "Well, she's asking about getting a new roommate to help with the rent. Says she can't afford the place on her own." That was interesting. Ashley had been making good money from her design business, certainly enough to cover rent on a one-bedroom apartment, but apparently not enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd gotten used to while I was subsidizing everything. "That's between you and her," I said. "I'm paid up through next month. After that, we'll need to figure something out." "Mike, can I be straight with you?" "Sure. You've always been straight with me. Rent on time, good communication, never any problems. Ashley's been difficult to deal with this week. Called me 3 times yesterday, asking about lease modification options, whether she could get you removed without your signature, what her options are if she can't find a roommate. I'm not trying to make things difficult for her, Jim, but I'm not going to just disappear and leave her with a financial mess that's somehow my fault." I get it. And honestly, if you want to talk about taking over the lease yourself, I'm open to that conversation. Might be easier than trying to navigate this roommate situation with her. Interesting. The apartment was in a good neighborhood, and I'd put a lot of work into restoring the original details. It might actually make sense for me to keep it and let Ashley figure out her own living situation. "Let me think about it," I said. Saturday night, Ryan convinced me to go out to Murphy's Pub, a bar where a bunch of our trade buddies hang out. Electricians, plumbers, HVAC guys, contractors, craftsmen of various types. Good people who work hard, take pride in their skills, and don't spend their time psychoanalyzing each other's life choices. It felt good to be around people who understood the value of what I do, who didn't see my work as some kind of temporary phase I'd eventually grow out of. These are guys who've built successful businesses, bought houses, raised families, created good lives for themselves doing skilled manual labor. We were having a good time, just talking about work projects and complaining about customers and enjoying some good beer, when around 10 p.m. Ashley showed up, with all three of her friends. She'd obviously been drinking. Her hair was messy, her makeup slightly smeared, and she had that overly bright expression people get when they're trying to hide how drunk they are. She walked straight up to our table, swaying slightly. "There he is," she announced loudly enough for half the bar to hear. "The guy who abandons his girlfriend when she needs him most." The conversation at nearby tables stopped. My friends looked uncomfortable. Ryan stood up slowly. "Ashley," I said quietly, "you should go home." "Should I? Should I go home to the apartment I can't afford because my boyfriend decided to throw a tantrum and disappear?" Madison was recording the whole thing on her phone, probably planning to post it on social media as evidence of my terrible behavior. Caroline was whispering to Brittany, both of them watching the scene unfold like it was entertainment. "You told me to find my own place," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I did exactly what you asked me to do. I was upset. I didn't mean literally disappear and leave me to handle everything alone." Ryan stepped forward. "Lady, maybe you should." "Oh, let me guess," Brittany interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. "Another one of Michael's blue-collar buddies. What is this? A support group for underachievers?" That did it. The whole table stood up. These are good men who work their asses off every day, who take pride in their craftsmanship, who've built successful lives and businesses with their hands and their minds. They weren't going to sit there and be insulted by some trust fund kid who'd never worked a real day in her life. "You need to leave," Ryan said firmly. "All of you." Caroline pulled out her phone and started recording too. "Are we really being intimidated by a bunch of—" "Finish that sentence," said Tommy Morrison, who's about 6'4" and builds custom homes that sell for over $1 million. "Please, I'd love to hear what you think we are." They didn't finish the sentence. Ashley looked at me one more time, and I could see something desperate in her eyes. 4 years, Michael. You're really throwing away 4 years over one argument?" "No," I said. "You threw away 4 years. I'm just refusing to pretend it didn't happen." "This is insane. People disagree sometimes. People have different visions for their futures. That doesn't mean you just give up. You didn't disagree with me, Ashley. You sat there while your friends spent 3 hours explaining why I wasn't worth your time, and then you told me to leave. There's nothing to give up on. It's already over." Madison stepped forward, still holding her phone. "You're really going to let your ego destroy this relationship?" "This isn't about ego," I said. "This is about self-respect." They left after that, Ashley's friends practically dragging her out of the bar while she looked back at me like she couldn't believe I wasn't chasing after her. The bar slowly returned to normal. My friends didn't ask a lot of questions, just bought me another beer and gradually shifted the conversation back to normal topics. These are guys who understand that sometimes relationships end badly, and sometimes the best thing you can do is just give a friend space to process without making a big deal about it. Sunday morning, I started seriously looking for my own apartment. Update 2, I found a place. It's a small one-bedroom in the Richmond neighborhood, about 10 minutes from my current main job site, where I'm doing a kitchen renovation for a family who owns a local restaurant. The rent is actually cheaper than what I was paying for my share of Ashley's place. And it has a basement workshop space that's perfect for my restoration projects. The landlord, Maria Santos, is a woman in her 50s who inherited the property from her parents and has been renting it out for years. When I told her what I do for work, she got excited. The previous tenant was an artist, but he never used the basement space, she said, showing me around. I've been hoping to find someone who would actually appreciate the workshop potential down there. The basement has good natural light from street-level windows, solid workbenches built by a previous tenant, and enough space for me to set up my tools properly. It's actually better than the cramped corner of Ashley's basement, where I'd been trying to do my restoration work. I do furniture restoration, I explained. Old pieces, antiques, custom work. I'm very careful about noise levels, and I can provide references from previous landlords. That sounds perfect, she said. Much better than loud parties or band practice. I signed the lease and put down the deposit the same day. Moving in next weekend. Meanwhile, the drama with Ashley has continued to unfold in predictable ways. She's been posting on social media about finding out who your real friends are, and people showing their true colors during difficult times. Her friends have been commenting with supportive messages about bullet dodged and toxic masculinity, and you deserve so much better. But something interesting happened on Tuesday. I got a call from Sarah Chen, who owns a small art gallery in the Pearl District. I'd done some custom framing work for her about a year ago when Ashley was working on some promotional materials for the gallery's website. "Michael, I hope this isn't awkward," she said, "but I heard through the grapevine that you and Ashley split up." "It's not awkward," I said. "Yeah, we did." "I'm sorry to hear that." Sarah, but actually, I wanted to talk to you about a project. I'm renovating the gallery space, and I need someone who can do both construction work and custom woodworking. Ashley always said you were incredibly talented. She said that? Oh yeah, she was always bragging about your work. She showed me photos of that dining table you made and the built-in bookshelves in your apartment. Incredible craftsmanship. She said you could build anything, that you had this amazing eye for combining function and beauty. This was interesting. Ashley had been praising my work to her professional contacts, talking about my skills and artistic vision, while simultaneously allowing her friends to dismiss everything I did as unskilled manual labor. I'd love to hear about the project, I said. We met Wednesday afternoon at the gallery. Sarah explained that she wanted to expand the space, create better flow for exhibitions, and add some custom display systems that would be more flexible than standard gallery walls. I need someone who understands both the technical construction requirements and the aesthetic goals, she said. Most contractors I've worked with can handle the basic building, but they don't have the design sense to create something that enhances the art rather than competing with it. We walked through the space together, and I could see exactly what she meant. The current layout was choppy and inefficient, with permanent walls that limited how she could arrange exhibitions. With some careful planning, we could open up the sightlines while creating modular display systems that would give her much more flexibility. I'm thinking movable panels that can be reconfigured for different shows, I said, but substantial enough that they don't feel temporary or cheap. Maybe a track system in the ceiling so you can create different room configurations depending on the artist's needs. Exactly, she said, getting excited. And I want the woodwork to feel integrated with the space, not like an afterthought. We spent 2 hours talking through possibilities, sketching ideas, discussing materials and timelines. It was the kind of conversation I love, creative problem solving that requires both technical knowledge and aesthetic judgment. This would be a 3-month project, Sarah said as we wrapped up. Full renovation, custom millwork, installation of the new systems. The budget is substantial. This is a major investment for the gallery. She named a figure that was more than I'd make in 6 months of regular construction work. Ashley actually recommended you specifically for this type of project, Sarah said. Before whatever happened between you two. She said you were the only contractor she'd trust with something that required this level of design sensitivity. I signed the contract that afternoon. That evening, Ashley called me from yet another new number. I heard you're working for Sarah now, she said without any greeting. Word travels fast. She was my client first. She's hiring me for construction work, Ashley. Different skill set. This is so petty. You're trying to take my business contacts. She called me, and apparently you recommended me for exactly this type of project. There was a long pause. I never said you weren't talented, Michael. Your friends did, while you sat there nodding. I was trying to keep the peace. They mean well. They just think I'm not good enough for you, and you let them convince you they were right. I was scared, she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. The San Francisco opportunity seemed so big, and they made it sound like I had to choose between my career and our relationship. You did have to choose, and you chose. I chose wrong, she said, crying openly now. Michael, I made a huge mistake. Can we try to work this out? Ashley, you sat there while your friends spent 3 hours explaining why I wasn't worth your time. Then you told me to find my own place. What exactly is there to work out? I love you. I've loved you for 4 years. One stupid conversation with my friends doesn't erase that. It wasn't one conversation, Ashley. It was months of them disrespecting me while you enabled it. It was years of you letting them treat me like I was beneath you. And when it came down to it, when you had to choose between standing up for me and keeping them happy, you chose them. I'll cut them off, she said desperately. I won't see them anymore. I'll tell them they were wrong about you. Don't do that. They're your friends. This is who you are. No, it's not. I got caught up in their opinions. I let them influence me. For how long, Ashley? How long have you been letting them influence you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been questioning our relationship for months, maybe years. My job, my education, my ambitions, whether I was holding you back. That didn't start with one dinner party. She was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she said finally. I don't know when I started listening to them more than I listened to myself. That's the problem, I said. I don't want to be with someone who has to choose to respect me. I want to be with someone who just does. I hung up. Update 3. Moving day was last Saturday, and it was both emotionally difficult and strangely liberating. Ashley was there when I came to get the rest of my stuff. She'd obviously been crying. Red eyes, smeared makeup, tissues scattered around the coffee table. The apartment was a mess. Dishes stacked in the sink, mail piled on the counter, clothes draped over furniture. It looked like she'd been living in chaos since I left. Please don't do this, she said the moment I walked in. I didn't answer, just started systematically packing my tools, books, the few pieces of furniture I'd brought to the relationship. My grandmother's rocking chair, the workbench I'd built for my restoration projects, boxes of books I'd collected over the years. I talked to my friends, she said, following me around the apartment. I told them they were wrong about you, that they didn't understand our relationship. I kept packing. Michael, please, look at me. I stopped and turned to face her. What do you want me to say, Ashley? Say you'll give us another chance. Say 4 years means something to you. 4 years meant everything to me. That's why this hurts so much. Then why are you giving up? I sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted by the whole situation. I'm not giving up. You gave up. The night you told me to find my own place, you gave up. Everything since then has just been logistics. I was wrong. I was stupid and scared and wrong, and I'm sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this. Why not? Because you showed me who you are when things got complicated. When your friends pushed, when you had to choose between keeping the peace with them and standing up for me, you chose them. And you'll do it again. No, I won't. Yes, you will. Because you care more about what they think than what I think. You always have. That's not true. Ashley, I said, trying to find a way to explain what I'd finally understood. Do you know what Sarah told me yesterday? She said you used to brag about my work to people, show them photos of furniture I'd made, talk about my artistic eye, my craftsmanship. But in 4 years of being together, you never once told me you were proud of what I do. She looked down at her hands. I was proud. I am proud. But you never said it, because your friends didn't value it, so you learned not to value it either. At least not out loud. At least not where it might conflict with their opinions of what you should want in a partner. I should have defended you. Yeah, you should have. 3 years ago when Madison first started making jokes about my job. 2 years ago when Caroline started psychoanalyzing everything I said. Last year when Brittany started suggesting you could do better. You should have shut it down the first time it happened. I was trying to keep everyone happy. Everyone except me. We sat in silence for a while, surrounded by boxes of my belongings, the physical evidence of a life being dismantled. What if I changed, she asked finally. What if I learned to set boundaries with them, to stand up for what I want, instead of what they think I should want? Ashley, I don't want to be with someone who has to learn to respect me. I want to be with someone who just does. I want to be with someone who sees my work as valuable, not as something to be apologetic about. I want to be with someone who's proud to introduce me to their friends, not someone who sits quietly while those friends explain why I'm not good enough. I stood up and continued packing. I love you, she said desperately. I love you too, I said. That's what makes this so hard. I finished loading the last box into my truck and turned back to her one final time. Ashley, I hope you figure out what you really want. Not what your friends think you should want. Not what looks good on social media. Not what fits some idea of success that other people have sold you. I hope you figure out what actually makes you happy. You made me happy, she said, crying again. No, I said. I made you comfortable. There's a difference. I left, and I haven't been back. Update 4. It's been 6 weeks since I moved out, and I'm honestly amazed at how much my life has improved. The gallery renovation project is going incredibly well. Sarah and I work together like we've been collaborating for years. She has this clear artistic vision, and I have the technical skills to make it reality. Every day brings new challenges that require both craftsmanship and creative problem solving. I've never worked with a contractor who actually understood what I was trying to achieve. She told me last week as we installed the new modular wall system. Usually I have to fight to get them to care about anything beyond basic functionality. The project has already led to 2 more jobs. Word is getting around Portland's art community about my work, and apparently there's a real demand for contractors who can handle both the technical and aesthetic requirements of gallery and studio spaces. I'm booked solid through the end of the year. All custom work that pays significantly better than general construction. For the first time in my career, I'm not just building other people's visions. I'm contributing to the creative process, collaborating with artists and designers to solve complex problems. Turns out, Ashley was right about one thing. I am talented. I just needed to find people who valued that talent instead of people who saw it as a limitation to be managed. Through the gallery project, I've met a whole community of artists, designers, and craftspeople who understand that creating beautiful, functional things is its own form.